Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Nadia Khomami. I'm the Arts and Culture correspondent at The Guardian. And I am very excited to introduce our two guests here today. The first is Dr. Alex George, Love Island star, A&E doctor, and the government's youth mental health ambassador. And our second guest is Jaman. He is the co-founder of Rebalance, and he is a coach and mentor who helps businesses and communities create mentally healthy environments. So welcome, Alex and Jan. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you. On a lovely day as well, sun shining through. It's
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Space of well-being.
Yeah. Trying to
Dogs,
improve
pet
our
therapy.
mental health.
Yeah.
So very thrilled to be discussing this important subject with you guys, especially on World Mental Health Day. So starting with yourself, Alex, I think everyone will recognize you from Love Island, but actually since you left the program, you've used your platform to advocate for better mental health. So I think everyone here will like to know how you got into that and why mental health is such an important subject to you.
Yeah, well, I think, when I was applying to med school, I think a lot of the interest I had was around, working in A&E, how exciting that was, fast-paced life and reacting to, car crashes, cardiac arrest, all this kind of stuff. Didn't really think about mental health at all as like a reason to become a doctor. It wasn't really something that was in my thought process, I guess. And when I was at uni, I think there was so little taught about mental health, particularly around well-being and self-care, a little bit on illness, but nowhere near as much as, with regards to physical health and physical health problems. And it probably wasn't until I actually started working in A&E I realised how much mental health we actually see. A&E doctors don't just see cuts and bruises and all these kind of things. We see a huge amount of mental health. Probably 1 in 4, 1 in 3 of all the patients we see either have direct or indirect reason to be there because of mental health. It's something to do with why they're there. And it really struck me that I really didn't understand a lot about how to look after myself, or and being a doctor, you think, well, you must know how to do that, and I didn't. And I think the longer that I worked at A&E, the more I realised that a lot of people don't know how to care for themselves, like truly, and what is going to be helpful for their mental health, what isn't, what is well-being, all these different things. And I guess coming off Love Island, I just wanted to do something positive for the platform that was kind of reflective of my interests and what I believe in, and that's why I started working in the space, I think. And over the years, that's kind of evolved. I did a lot of campaigning with Samaritans and other charities, and over the last couple of years, I think mental health has become one of the most important things for our country and the people here. I think it always has been. I just think we've realised now more than ever. I think someone really eloquently described it as, right now we're in probably a crisis on a crisis with mental health. There always was, I think, a crisis underlying in the way that we approach mental health in terms of treatment, in terms of services, etc. Now we're seeing that exponential rise, during and post-pandemic. So it's been very important to me, and in the role that I'm in, I just want to keep working, towards supporting young people, particularly around mental health, making sure that there is support out there when they need it, and also breaking down stigma. I think those are the big areas that I want to work on.
Absolutely. John, what about yourself? So you used to work in social care, is that
Yeah.
right? So how did you become involved in mental health work?
I think stigma. So picking up on your point, stigma is a big bit of it. So I experienced mental illness. It wasn't diagnosed at first, but I had my first panic attack when I was still working in mental health services. And I, even though we were delivering service, we were delivering care and support to people, and I passionately, wholeheartedly believed in that. I couldn't accept, or I just didn't make the connection, probably is a better one, that I had my own mental health as well. So this idea that we all have physical health here, but we also all have mental health, and that doesn't mean we're ill, it just means we have it. So I thought there was something wrong with my heart. I thought there was something else going on. And it took me time to realise that the conversations I was having in the workplace were very different to the conversations I was having personally. Also lost a couple of people to suicide that were very close to me at the time as well. So for me, I started to realise that in social care, we were taught a lot about having conversations, about engaging with people, all these different models around public health and how we can engage. but actually we weren't having anything, like you were saying, around the mental health conversation. And when we did, it was all about illness. So it was all about services and diagnosis and medication and things like that. So for me, it then started to become a bit of a passion, really. And off the back of that, it became about community development. How do we identify? Who are we? What does that sense of belonging mean to us? Because all of those things seem to be integrated with this concept of mental health, but the broader picture, which is well-being, really. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that you yourself have had that experience, because I think most people here themselves will have had experience of mental health or know someone who has had an experience of mental health. And like you were saying, Alex, we're at such a crucial point in society right now, especially coming out of the pandemic. Everyone felt, anxious at some point, I think. And there was a recent UN report that said 1 in 5 young people around the world right now often feel depressed. So, I mean, do you both think that we have the right structures in place in society to deal with what I think is a crisis at the moment?
What I think is we need to take quite a big shift, I think, in our attitude towards it. And I mean, you alluded to it with almost how we view mental health. Like it's for some people and not others. Like I visited actually a residential home a week or so ago and spoke to some older people about it. And everyone I asked about mental health was like, oh yes, when I was younger I knew people that had that. And I think when I was like, what about physical health? It's like, oh, well, yeah, I go outside in the gardening and I do this and that. It's that very much that feeling of like, that's not for me, that's not something that I have. Yep. And if you Google it online, like physical health versus mental health is all glossy pictures, someone running, abs looking great. Mental health is like the grayscale picture, head in the hands, very negative view of it, which I think it really sets the tone then for how we all view it, And I think, thanks for sorry.
Adding atmosphere.
Adding a real poignant thing I'm about to say. And I forgot what I was going to say, But I think it's very important we shift our attitude. First of all, to see that we all really do have it. I see mental health as like a scale, and like one end is like perfect mental health, which actually kind of doesn't exist. So it's kind of an odd scale, but it's kind of there. And then you've got like really severe mental illness, and in your life you could start anywhere on the scale, and you can move anywhere on the scale. That's the funny thing about it. And just because you're up here doesn't mean you can't be down here, and vice versa. And I think we need to realise a little bit more and learn a bit more about how you stay at the good end of the scale and and if you have mental illness, how to move away from that space. Or it might well be learning that you might have a mental illness, but right, what do I do to manage that? How do I treat that? And how do I get to a place that I am happy with, like an outcome that you're happy with? And I think that's the shift we need to take in terms of attitude. And then that will reflect in education, at schools, decisions that are made in policy, because I think ultimately politicians, when they make decisions, at least from what I see, it hopefully reflects often what the public's interest is. So if the public's interest is heavily in mental health's important, when you sort this out, then hopefully the result is politicians follow that.
Yeah, I'd agree. Everything he said, basically, particularly about the muscles and six packs. That's my aspiration. But it's. I think education is a part of it. Education, definitely. We need to become emotionally literate. We need to be able to talk about our mental health. We need to be able to, you're all here, I'm sure, because of this man and other things. And I need to apologise as well, because I'm not Poppy Jaman, who's in the brochure as well. She's unfortunately unwell. But we're engaged in this topic, as you were saying, and it means something to us. And I think the last 18 months, 2 years has probably shown us that more than ever before. I would say education's part of it. I think we also need to look at policy. We need to look at resourcing. Services have been under-resourced for a considerable period of time, regardless of our politics. I think we can see the impact of that, and maybe any of us that have tried to engage in health services over the last couple of years particularly have probably seen that that's been harder in some ways, or more of a struggle in some ways. And I think we need to look at the systems and the processes that sit behind that as well. So we have huge disparities, I believe, in our health system here in this country. We see lots of different marginalised communities with a significant impact of mental well-being and mental illness in them. And how can we start to have those conversations, I think, to start to readdress some of that as well. And if we stay on the topic of young people, which is what this space has all been about, then I think we look at young people, and there's been lack of education because of COVID, lack of connection with each other, loneliness, all of these are in the pot. conversations like this mean so much, I think, but we do also need to see the action that sits behind it as well and start to move things forward, which is why I think it's great in that you're in the role that you are, because you can start to influence policymakers as well. You know?
But I think the point you make about disparity as well is important, because the other day I just was looking at some of the statistics around the country and how much variation there is in access to support. And some parts of the country you might wait a fortnight to see someone, a mental health practitioner if you're a young child. But if you go to East London, parts of East London, the average wait time is 261 days, which if you think that, you could be in a desperate situation where you are, really in a situation where you are desperate for help and you need someone to come in and provide you the care that you need, and you wait 261 days. I mean, I don't think there's anyone that would think that's acceptable. And we do need to look at that and think, why is that the case? What is the solution? I think it's very complex. I think people will say, let's just fund CAMS.
And it's not.
I think it's not as simple as that. I do think clearly we need more funding towards CAMS. There's not many people that argue that either, but it's not the entire solution, is it?
Right.
And if you look at the whole scale, go back to that mental health kind of scale, you need to think and cater for everyone on that. Fine, this portion right at the top end, they might not need a lot of input because they're doing all right, but maybe education for them to stay in that space is a good idea, and that might be the education stuff at school. But there's a big block in the middle that are functional, maybe they're not desperate for help, maybe they don't meet the criteria for CAMS, but they might end up there if you don't help them. And it's not just young people, it's people of all age. So what do you do for this block of people? And I think that's where some of the things I'm very interested about is early support hubs. I don't know how many people have seen the kind of campaign with that, but essentially we want to have this space for under 25s in the community where people can walk in and access help there and then. So on the day, no referral, less barriers. We know one big issue for young people is barriers. So having to speak to a grown-up, tell them they're struggling, then the grown-up needs to be able to take them to somewhere to speak to someone, probably the GP. The GP then needs to refer them to CAMS. You might get to CAMS and be told 6 months later you're not at the threshold for care. So where do you go then? Where does that young person go 6 months later? And I think that's what I'm really passionate about with these early support hubs, because this wraparound service, youth support worker led, who can then get to know that young person and input into counselling or whatever therapies are needed, and also look at that kind of whole wellbeing approach. Do they need to be outside more? We need to think about how to get them into groups and tackle loneliness. We know loneliness is one of the biggest issues for young people at the moment as well. So
how important do you think education is? Because when I was in school, I don't remember any teachers speaking to us about our mental health. We didn't have any classes about it. I mean, has that changed now? Is it important?
I think you mentioned emotional literacy. I'm sure you can probably talk a lot further than I can about it, but I think it's very important. If you can't vocalize and label, understand, this is this feeling and emotion, this is how it's presenting in my behavior and how I'm acting, what I'm doing, then how are you going to be able to vocalize that successfully? And actually, that's why behaviour change is often with children the first thing you notice. There might be that naughty kid at school. You think, they're just naughty. Well, actually, is there a reason that they're behaving that way, that they're being disruptive? Is that them telling you basically that they're struggling? And I think education is a key to give them the tools to be able to vocalise that. But it's also not just education children, it's education at the other end, because there's a difference between listening and understanding. And I think giving people the ability to understand the cues and spot and hear what they're saying and really know what to do with that. But
I'd really agree. So in terms of education, I think teaching people what the basics of mental health and mental illness mean, this idea of a spectrum that Alex is talking about, sort of healthy, coping, struggling, unwell, where are you now? I don't think many of us take much time to actually check in and see how we're feeling at any one time. We tend to just do. Life is very busy. We're moving from one task to the next, particularly with work, particularly if we're a carer or a parent or anything else. And actually just to stop and go, how am I? What's going on for me? I'm feeling these different emotions. And emotions are good, they're just part of the human experience. And we tend to think to be healthy, I have to feel happy all the time, or I have to feel settled all the time, or I have to feel focused and positive. And actually, we can feel anything. It's just a feeling. We can then start to work with that feeling if we have some emotional literacy and some understanding about it. So I think there's a bit about that. There's also a piece, as Alex says, around teaching others to recognise that in each other as well. And I think that is often things like so I think about me and my stress response to things. It's things like not being able to focus, procrastinating, lack of energy, brain fog. I just become a bit of a miserable sod, basically, and I'm not much pleasure to be around. And one of the key indicators for me is I notice as I lose my sense of humour and I can't sleep as well. So if those two things start flashing up in my life, then I start to know that I need to do something about it as well. So I think teaching people to notice that in each other, but I imagine mine are probably different to yours. So then we need to have the conversation whilst we're all in a healthier space around what does healthy look like to you? Because I think often we get caught up that success needs to be a certain thing, and whether you're at university or early careers or working 20 years in the corporate world, we get caught up, this is how I have to be. So starting to ask that question, what do I want to be? What does healthy look like? What does good look like to me? And then we can start to work from there.
And Alex, is this part of your job as the government's youth mental health ambassador, sort of having these discussions and coming up with structures that we can put in place to help better people's mental health? I mean, can you tell us a bit more about that job and how you even got it to begin with?
Well, it's not well paid. I don't get paid. No, it's a volunteering role. The good thing about being a volunteer is if you don't do it well, then no one can really tell you off about it. It's not bad. No,
you won't have Boris Johnson on the phone.
No, I think the biggest part for me of the role is trying to shine light in areas that are going well, and let's do more of that, and the areas that we need to improve on. There's so many experts around the table, and that's what's important to say. I'm not working. It's not like Alex, go and fix this. It'd be arrogant and ignorant for me to think that I would be able to do that. I work alongside some amazing people from charity sector to NHS to otherwise, and I think it is recognising, what can we do, what campaigns can we run to help. I mean, things we've run with anti-bullying campaigns, we created wellbeing videos, like with Joe Wicks, and we had different people that we got these videos to go out to all the schools for them to watch, and just doing stuff that's really positive as well about mental health. It's sometimes going to be very negative a lot of the time. When it comes to funding, it's focusing on specific things. I think, being really targeted, and I think the early support hubs is an example of a target I'd like to achieve. I'd like to have these support hubs across the UK, accessible to all children. That's an example to me of an area that I think I can work on.
And you started doing that after working in A&E during the pandemic. That must have been really difficult, both on your own mental health and seeing other people come in with mental health issues.
Yeah, I mean, for example, we've got 19 beds in Lewisham Hospital in the majors department. Resus has got more for the sickest patient, and the urgent care minors has got a different area. But in the majors, you're like fairly sick. You're in the middle, I guess. 19 beds. One bed is allocated room that's supposed to be like quieter and a better space to see someone with a mental health crisis. And at certain times of the pandemic, and even now, sometimes half of the beds with patients with crisis. So it was designed thinking in mind that we only need one, but we're using a huge amount of that space for those that are struggling. I think that reflects the situation that we're in. A huge amount of self-harm, overdoses, and the like, and it's hard to see. It's really difficult to see, and it's all ages as well. Huge variation in who presents in crisis, and people are desperate because sometimes they feel there's nowhere to go. Sometimes there isn't anywhere to go.
And you had quite a life-changing experience, horrible life-changing experience with the death of your brother. That must have motivated you to go out there and try and enforce some change in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I clear-eyed of suicide a bit over a year, and obviously that is a life-changing thing for anyone to go through. Very hard because at the time I was very much aware of how hard it was in the mental health of everyone, particularly young people, I think, those at uni as well, and I was creating videos and content around it, and then literally weeks after creating content about what to do if you're in crisis, that happens, and it's one of those things, it either destroys you or you do something with it, and I think that's the option I had like that left or right kind of moment, and I thought, let's try and do something about this. I didn't really expect, though, in January when I posted an open letter to the Prime Minister that it would end up in this situation. You never think, this will happen.
What was the open letter? What did it say?
I did a post on my Instagram, and it was I basically had spent, since he died in the summer, I'd spent 5-6 months speaking to anyone who would listen, really, and talk to them about what's the problem, where do the issues lie, collated everything that basically people told me, I put together, and I tried to create it into a hit list of what we need to change. And I wrote an open letter with some of those things on it on Instagram, which then went viral. And Number 10 reached out, and what did they say? Something along the lines of, let's have a call. And I had a call with the advisors, and it led on to another call, and eventually the Prime Minister was like, look, let's have him come on board as a volunteering role as an ambassador. He can focus on the areas that he thinks need to change, and we'll look at what we can do. And so I was like, well, let's give it a go. I think it was about a month between it going out on my Instagram and being in the role. So it's quite quick as well.
Wow.
And I didn't go into that trying to get it. I just wanted to speak to the Prime Minister and say, look, this are some of the things I found out. I didn't go into it trying to get a role. There was no job. It wasn't in the shop window, apply for this role, give it a go. It just transpired.
And what was his response? Was he quite responsive to what you were saying?
I think, it's hard you can't really ignore the situation, can you, in terms of, the statistics and stuff are there for people to see. 1.5 million-ish young people with new mental health problems that didn't have it before. I mean, that's 17 Wembley stadiums full of children. That's a lot of people. So the hope is, though, that we really do actually need to actively do something. Talking's important, but action's very important. The difficult thing is there's many generations of underfunding and things to fix, isn't it? You're talking. I mean, some people have said that the gap between the funding and what we need and what we have is about 12 billion a year. It's quite a lot of cash. I mean, compared to track and trace, but still quite a lot of cash. Don't quote me on that, but it's a lot of cash.
Yeah. And John, you founded Rebalance. Can you tell us a bit more about what that does? You work with communities, don't you?
Yeah. So Poppy and I co-founded Rebalance over lockdown, but if I sort of track back, it was about it was a genuine belief in the power of connections, and connections create healthier, stronger communities. If we can find and share the wisdom, new and old, and there's often, you talking there around resourcing, there's often solutions around the world that we can look at rather than just the one that we think is the obvious one. Empower people, give people a space for voices and their experience to be heard, then actually change comes out of that as well. So Rebalance is a platform, global platform that brings together wisdom, knowledge, experience, and through that, we've done work with South Asian women using the sari as a vehicle to have conversations about mental health and wellbeing, the Green Sari project, right through to working in the corporate world on data center building around the world with big key software companies around creating mentally healthier structures and psychologically safe businesses. So it's everything in between, but it comes back to the core of how can you create a health environment for an individual.
That's such an interesting term, psychologically safe. What does that mean?
I think it probably means different things to different people, but the idea for me, psychologically safe, means how can I be myself? And I think a phrase that we often hear is be your authentic self. And we were having this discussion earlier, actually, with a panel of young people on this very stage. And what does authenticity mean? And again, so it's similar to the idea of health. I don't mean it means this perfection of yourself. I think it just means being able to live out your values wherever you are and seeing representations of yourself in the rooms that you're in as well that enable you to start to feel like you can enter that rooms, you have a space in that rooms, you're allowed there, and whether that's around the intersectionality of your data, of your identity, around things like your sexuality, your gender, or who you are, your ethnicity and your sort of profiling of yourself, all of those things come together to create a psychologically safe space. So, for example, this, I would say, is a psychologically safe space. A lot of work's been done and thought's been done to make this an open, accessible environment as well. And you can do that in big corporates, which is exciting, a little bit scary sometimes, but very exciting. The impact you can have, because those businesses not only touch the commercial world, but they touch the communities they're located in, or you can do it through community development as well. And I think coming back to your support hubs idea, that's a really good example of placing a service in a community as well, and actually listening to the needs of the people, the young people, which is we want to try and reduce some of the barriers, and some of those is talking to an adult, rather than coming in and deciding that this is the best way to do it by, I don't know, maybe putting more beds in A&E or whatever it might be, starting another helpline.
Yeah. Well, it's like what you were saying about like learning. I think it's pretty poignant about learning about from other parts of the world as well. I spoke to this really far more brain cells than I have, Professor Vikram, who's like the global leader in mental health and how we approach that. And he's done many years of research. He's founded centres of mental health abroad. In India, he's got like a really big one. And a lot of the work that he's looked at is like task sharing. So the idea of going from, right, who provides wellbeing support and mental health support. It doesn't make sense to have that being provided by, a professor in psychiatry, because how long does it take to train a professor in psychiatry, and how many do you need to kind of supply, an area and look after people effectively, and whether that's the right way to do it. And it came from the fact that he trained actually in London, worked in, I think, UCL, then went out to, I believe it was Zimbabwe to work, and he got there to work as a psychiatrist and realised that the population was like X amount, it was a huge amount. There's like 500 psychiatrists in the whole place. I thought, well, right, I can't care for everyone is not going to work, so I'm going to have to think of another way of doing it. So what he did is thought, well, if I train, you and you to do some psychotherapies, and I train you and you to help with the medication, and then I train you to do this. The idea of getting members of the community basically to deliver care, to deliver treatment, and then he realised that actually it was as effective to get, if I train you properly, you will deliver it just as effective as I will, being this professor in psychiatry, because you know how to do it, and you can integrate in the community and know people properly, they're comfortable with you. And he realised actually a lot of it is shifting where we provide the care. And I think we need to do that in this country as well. And that's why I think the shift, and it's giving people different jobs within that to do that. It's kind of barbershop idea. Loads of people talk to their barbers more about the most important things in their lives than anyone else that they come across. So how do we think about that amongst our community? Because is a responsibility entirely on doctors and stuff to fix mental health, or is it for all of us? I think it's that idea, and that's why these hubs, I think, are quite exciting. Sorry to keep plugging them, but they are.
Yeah, no, it's good. And so I'd come back to creative solutions. So again, one of the young people we had on the panel earlier just qualified as a doctor, Dr. Shah Alam. And he was talking about, he's actually being involved in a project that we're working on, which is working with imams and faith leaders in communities to actually train up and skill people up to have conversations around wellbeing and mental health and this early signs and symptoms pickup, because we know that that's going to have a quicker and more engaged community than it is about putting another health service in
100%.
there. But you need to make sure that service is there once people notice it, to be able to signpost and get people in, and it needs to be a kind of culturally aware service as well. So I absolutely agree that let's look at the wisdom that's there, but also let's engage, let's have the conversation and see what people want. We know that young people, for example, need access to services, and this is how they want to engage with them, but we probably don't talk as much to other communities as well to try and find out what that is. And I think it's continuing that conversation whilst running parallel. We're introducing these new ideas, testing them, see what works, adjust them, and continue in that way.
Yeah, just to say, if anyone's got a question or wants to make a point, we've got mics, so just stick your hand up and ask these guys a question. I have a question, which is, I think all three of us have experienced anxiety and depression in our pasts. So I'd quite like to know, what tips do you have for someone to sort of make themselves feel better or live a mentally healthy lifestyle?
Do you mean from a place of illness or just in general?
In general.
Well, I think the point you made about checking in with yourself is probably the first thing. I'd be interested to how often do others check in on themselves. Sometimes you might go months and go, I actually haven't even thought about how I am, like where am I, like amongst everything. And I think being aware of yourself and what you're feeling, what you're thinking, I think is the first step, because then you know where to kind of start and whether you need to go and get support, or whether it's actually adjustments in your life that you need to do. Do you need more downtime? What is it that you need? And then I think it's looking at your life and going, what are the things that are like conducive towards good mental health, and what are the things that are kind of knocking it down? And there's some things you can control, there's some things you can't. A&E, for example, is a stressful environment. That's my job. That's always going to be pretty stressful. I can't change the fact that that's stressful, how many people come through the door, but can I manage the things around that to kind of look at, how I can look after my mental health? So for me, it might be going for a walk in the morning before I go to A&E, so I'm in a calm space, making sure I have a good night's sleep. When I come back from A&E, bath bomb and chill out. In the evening, I read a book or whatever, rather than coming home maybe and having 3 or 4 glasses of wine, because that's an easy way, and I've done that in the past. It's been a stressful day in A&E, you come back and have a couple of drinks. You might feel that de-stress, but then you sleep badly, you're tired the next morning, the next shift's harder because you're tired, and so on. So that's what I try and do, is just look at the daily stuff. How can I make changes and make that better?
Sounds great. I like the idea of you in the bath bomb. That sounds brilliant.
Do you like the idea of me in the bath bomb?
Well, there's that as well. That's probably not something to share here, but yeah, do you have petals and things as well?
I can if you want them.
Okay. I think for me, it's all of that. It's about being aware, especially about. I have showers, unfortunately, but yeah, I'm going to start. It's about being aware, but I think I spent a long time and still continue at the age of 47 to try and understand who I am and how I operate and what my systems and processes are and the way that I interpret the world and myself. And to me, that's become more of an interest and a passion and I enjoy it. But there's been significant times in my life where that's felt difficult, and actually I've wished myself to be different, or I've wished myself to be somebody else, looking around thinking that they're happier or more comfortable. So I think for me, a key part about maintaining mental health and well-being is trying to find peace with myself and trying to find self-advocacy and trying to find parts of me that I enjoy and that I'm happy about and I can celebrate. So that was one bit for me. So I take time to nurture those and protect those and celebrate them. And whether that's about thinking about some things that I've done in a day that I'm proud of, thinking about some things that would have happened if I wasn't there, that happened because I was there and I was part of in some way, thinking about hopes that I've got for the next day and then building those in, just taking time to reflect on me is one key part of it. I also base it around the 5 ways to well-being. So there's that, and I'm going to forget them now, I know I am, but here we go. Give, connect, take notice, keep learning, and the 5th one I've forgotten. But New Economics Foundation, piece of research, what are the key ways to look at how we look after ourselves? So I make sure that I'm doing one of those every day, and I literally diarise it. It goes in my calendar, and I make sure that there's something happening.
But that's the key point, is the everyday stuff.
You have to be
and
focused
it's not always
on it.
easy.
No, it's not. It's a
all
bit
of
like
it's
going
easy.
to the gym or eating a certain way or whatever it is. It's about finding a rhythm, and it's not always easy. Yeah, definitely.
And that's why I think anchoring it to habits, like a lot of the reason I wrote the book and the stuff I put in there is about how to actually create consistency, because things like motivation are very poor ways to like stick to something. You need to create an anchor into your day for everything that you do, so that you basically get to a situation where you get up and go to the shower. You don't think, am I going to shower today? Well, I hope not anyway. Most of you should be going to shower. You might think, do I want a bath bomb? That's a good thought. But you go to the shower, you have a shower, you brush your teeth, and you start your day. So like in my head, it's like, get up, shower, brush my teeth, grab a coffee, go for a walk. That's just like my thing. And like that's my start of my day. And part of that as well now has been like not pick up the phone in between, do all that, then pick up the phone when I'm back
Yep.
my walk and start my day.
Yep.
And the end of your day might be like, right, it's 5 o'clock or whatever it is, train or gym, or it might be, sit and read or whatever it is you'll get out, and you anchor that day and then you stick to that. And some days you think, oh, I really can't be bothered. It's like going to the gym, like, oh, I can't be asked to go to the gym today, and oh, I really don't want to. And then you go and you leave and go, oh gosh, I feel great now. How often does that happen? When,
Yeah.
I really didn't want to go, but I left and I feel great because of it. Sometimes it isn't easy. Sometimes you have to just do it.
And I think as well, the other thing that I worked out for me is that it's not always the things that I think are obvious. So we all know that good nutrition, sleep, exercise, all of these things are good for us. But actually, one of the things that I love is reading stories. So I just make time to do that. Now, I don't necessarily equate that with good mental health, but I know that it feeds me and it calms me down and it takes my brain somewhere else. I know that a little bit of mindfulness is good for me. I know a little bit of yoga is good for me. So finding other things that I get involved with as well. My wife's got a passion for saris, just spending a bit of time around her, hearing her talk about her passion for fabrics and saris and where they come from and the nature of the fabrics is great. So learning, connecting with others, all of these things that we don't probably go, that's good for my mental health, are going to be feeding us and going to be helping us to stay calm. What do you do? What do you do to help stay calm and keep healthy?
Well, I was going to say it's been particularly weird at the moment because I'm sure everyone's got their own experiences, but just like working from home for 2 years has been odd, and just my workspace and my leisure space being combined, that's been really weird. Things opening up again and having to make social plans and knowing when to say yes and when to say no to things and trying to kind of muster up the courage to go out and meet people, that is difficult. So what I wanted to ask you is, coming out of the pandemic, is there things that we should sort of take into consideration, or things that we could train ourselves into sort of doing and thinking to help us come to terms with like our new reality?
Me first? Okay. Well, I think the first thing is try it out. So put yourself in situations and try something new. I think keep learning is important and keep connected to people. I mean, for some of us, the pandemic's actually been a bit of a blessing in some way. So putting aside all of the impact it's had on many people, actually for those experiencing anxiety and maybe struggling with social interactions, it's been a good thing. So taking the aspects that have worked and build that into whatever the next steps are as well. Being kind to yourself, I think, is important. Just be compassionate and kind to yourself. So this was the first time today that I'd ever sat in a room and looked people in the eye and you hadn't been on a screen. So done lots of these kind of things, but without you all being real. You've all got bodies and legs. It's amazing. But
you're wearing trousers most of the
time.
I know. Zoom apparently is not.
It's just quite incredible, but you're not a little thumbnail on screen. So I guess just be kind to yourself and expect that things are probably going to feel a little bit strange to start with as well. And then I think back to Alex's point about building in habits, so making sure the time is in there, and don't get lost back in. This is a call to me as well. Don't get lost back into the busyness of the day to day as well. Make sure we're making those time for those kind of mindful, calmer moments as well.
You mentioned the working from home. I'd love to hear. That's something I would like to hear from just the audience. Like, how have you found working from home? How is this transition? Because we're in this weird transition now of like into hybrid working and what that looks like. How much do we go back? Is it 2 days a week, 3 days a week? Are you fully back? Are you not? And I think people have found that transition very difficult as well, as you said, because you kind of become comfortable in your bubble. It's almost like the Stockholm stuff, isn't it? Like, I'm comfortable in this now, and then when you go back, it's like now it becomes uncomfortable. So where do you find the balance without ending up maybe back into a place you didn't want to be before? Because I think a lot of people have found, you know, the balance of working from home sometimes and going to the office to be quite a good balance.
Does anyone have a question about transitioning back to
or just an experience, how you found it? They've all got quiet.
There's a hand.
Got mic there. There you go.
Oh.
Someone doesn't like the transition.
Yeah.
They were napping. I think they got disrupted there.
I just thought I'd join in because it was quiet. So I
Thank
found
you.
it quite useful with my sort of office work. I've got office work and admin, and then in a happy little bubble on my to-do list, I do my practical mindfuls. So every time I'm just like melting and my brain's compounding, I water the plants, feed the cat, hoover the roof, whatever.
Yeah, I think plants are really helpful. There's a plant backstage that Alex was trying to steal to take home.
I am going to steal it, actually. Yeah. I'm just figuring out how, not if. It's quite a tall one, but I can put it through the sunroof. I think it'll be all right. Harry can hold it, like balancing the way back. But I think it's a very good point about nurturing, actually. And nurturing is, I think, very good for us. And I have plants as well. And there's something like really nice about watering them. I don't know what the psychological thing of that is, but it's definitely helps. And it goes back to little things. Those are quite small things, but they're that process of, like, I guess people call it grounding, different terms for it, but it's like bringing yourself back to that kind of moment and how it feels. And I guess linking on from the plants is kindness, the other big part, not just for yourself, but often being kind to other people, and trying to incorporate opportunities to do that in your day is really nice.
Yeah, well, 5 Ways of Wellbeing talks about so giving of ourselves, giving of time as well. I think a good place to start is, what do you do that feels nice? What do you enjoy doing? And then do more of that, because that's going to feed you, that's going to feel good. And whether that's drawing or music or reading or exercise or talking to people or whatever it might be, do more of the things that feed you, because that is going to be nourishing and nurturing.
And sometimes don't rely on whether you feel like you want to. If you know that these things, it's kind of good to have a list of, like, these are the things I know that help me. And then even when you don't want to, you've got to do them. You know, you've got to actively put energy. Like, it's that idea of investing.
Do you have
in
a physical list like that? Do you write it somewhere and then go back and go, right, I know I don't feel like this, but I'm going to just do it because I've written it down?
I haven't, but I have it like in my head. I know there's like certain things that I do, and like if I don't, like at the moment, because I've been going around doing this mental health tour, and I'm trying to speak to young people and try and get voices across the country, which means I've been up to Scotland, Wales, Midlands, Birmingham, all the way around the country, which is important because I want to hear from young people in diverse situations. But part of that means thrown my whole thing, like stomping in the morning is important as I go for my walk, all that stuff. I've lost a lot of, even the nutrition stuff, my sleep. I'm sleeping in different places, and when you sleep in a new place, half your brain stays awake because it's in the guard mode. It's like a defense mechanism when we're living in caves. If you're in a new cave, then you're ready to fight a bear or whatever. There's no bears in Premier Inn, I don't think, but your brain is like not sleeping very well, and so it's thrown me quite a lot. So I now have to be like, right, I need to get back into this, you know.
And do you find that the busyness of your role, both for what you do and also the ambassador role as well, is there's a tension between that and the well-being? There's an irony there.
Huge, yeah. It's a
so
huge
everyone's saying talk about well-being,
stressful,
but at the same time you've got to do these 10 appointments today.
Yeah, it's a huge, and then that is life, you know, and that's what you kind of have to accept, is that not everything in life. That's what I talked about, like the good things and the bad things for it, because there's going to be a list for both, and some of those things you can't remove, and you've got to accept that doing that is in some ways almost like painful, but you have to do it to get to or do what you want to achieve, but then you need to counterbalance that. And that's why I think about I quite like the tokens idea as well, like and the idea that you need to build your tokens to be able to spend them. If you keep spending tokens, you run out, and then you break down, the machine breaks. So you need to be able to top those tokens up. And I think, you know, the last couple of weeks I've spent a hell of a lot of tokens, so I need to spend time now building them back up, and that doesn't happen overnight. Just say, I'll have a quiet Sunday afternoon. That doesn't just replenish all of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can't spend without, I like the idea that if you put an energy in one direction, you get the opposing. I believe in that quite a lot. So
It sounds like a lot of the tips that you guys have and that mindfulness example, it's all sort of away from our screens. Do you think that's quite important? Are we spending too much time on our phones and on the computer? And
we're
on
in a very
social
odd
media?
time of like, we are hyper connected, but not. Like we're so logged on in all of the time, but in a way that's not like true meaningful connection. I think it's a huge risk now that to young people particularly, that it's so easy to sit on Zoom or to FaceTime your mates, that getting up, getting on the tube and going and seeing them in person is actually a huge effort, and therefore it's easy to just do that. Like my brother Cleo spent a lot of time on Xbox on the live and chatting to his mates, and then they weren't on Friday night, rather than going and sitting and playing Xbox together and having the fun of going outside on a walk, having a pizza in between, whatever. On a Friday night, they're all just on the live, and they're not in the same room. And to me, I just can't understand that. But that is how like a lot of people are growing up now, and I think that's quite scary, to be honest.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's I can't really talk for young people's experience because I'm 47, so I'm not there.
Still young.
For me, social media isn't something that works, and I tried it for a few years and I just found it added to my stress container. It made things worse. So I'm the one that doesn't join in with family chats and all of those kind of things. I'm that annoying person that goes, what's the plans? I don't know what we're doing. But for me, that's a way of looking after my mental health. That's a way of regulating how I feel. I think for some people the story is it makes me feel connected. It makes me feel part of something. I feel part of a community where I didn't before. There's an identity here. So actually there's a positive to it. But I think this generation is growing up. I look at my own 4 young people in our family and the young people that we engage with as well, that actually we're in uncharted territory. We don't know what the impact of this is longer term. There's lots of evidence that says actually spending too much time, as you talk to, is not going to be good for us. And we can certainly get very insular and lost in this world. And I think anyone can see that that's not healthy. But how can we use it as a force for good and creating health and creating opportunity and access? Maybe there's something there in that. For me personally, I've spent more time in front of a screen than I've ever done in the last 2 years. It's done nothing for my posture. It's done nothing for my eyesight. It's done nothing. Yeah, no, I know. And as soon as I say that, I kind of go, right, here we go, engage core.
It's like everyone think about your breathing. Yeah.
But it really hasn't. But what it has done is it's given me the opportunity to not get on a plane and fly to Hong Kong or somewhere else and have a conversation. I can have that conversation now. So there is something in it. But I think we need to be aware that it's not the answer to everything as well.
It's like the whole argument, is social media good or bad? I think there's been so much research into both sides, and most of it just says it's both. I mean, for as many people that say they feel connected and they feel an identity, they feel a part of something, there's as many of those, and then there's people that go, no, it's terrible for mental health. So, is it good or bad? It's hard to say, but I think the big part is we need to educate young people how to use it for your benefit, and how do you protect yourself against the kind of negative sides of it, or how do you deal with it when it goes wrong. And I think at the moment we're in this experimental age of we're just all just using it without, it's almost like going out and driving a car without ever doing driving lessons. Like we're all just driving these cars around, there's TikTok and Instagram, and just finding out and seeing what happens. And I think that is, I guess, the risk.
Your social media experience must have been quite bizarre, because you had a couple of hundred followers on Instagram one day, then you go on Love Island, you come out and you've got 1 million followers, 2 million followers. How was that? That must have been so weird.
Yeah, it's an odd one, because I didn't really use Instagram before, so I went from not using it to having to use it a lot, and I think that was a huge whoa. So in a way, I had to do that whole learning thing with it. I didn't know how to post a story when I started off there. I was like, how do you do a story? And now everyone wishes that I didn't know how to do one. Like, stop showing us all plants. But it was a big learning curve, and I definitely feel a lot of that stuff where people talk about you seeing hate stuff online or trolling, all this stuff. We see it, and it's not just about me being like, I've got all these followers. Whoever is seeing that, it affects them. It's like, even if you're not trolled, say on Twitter at all, and you have an account that's faceless account, and you just go on there to view content, trolling's still going to affect you, even if it's not at you, because it might be someone like you that's being attacked, or someone that has a shared view that you have that's being attacked. Often I think we think about trolling as big celebrities being trolled and how that impacts them, but them being trolled has an indirect effect to other people that might share similar values, look the same, identify from a similar place, and what effect that happens on them, and particularly young people are on there, really young people all the time. So yeah, I think it is a bit of an experiment at the moment, but I don't think it's going anywhere. Social media is not going anywhere. If anything, we're going to use it more, not less. So let's use it in some way safely, or as safely as possible. Let's make a driving test for social media.
How, I was just going to say, so how did you, talking about tips and tricks, how did you manage that sudden visibility and being put on all these platforms as well?
Not well for the first few months. I think for 6 months I was really lost with it all. It was well, crazy is probably the best word for it. It was that kind of experience, and yeah, it was a lot of trying to ground myself and get used to it all. I mean, I was subject to the same dopamine hits that everyone is. Human beings are wired quite similarly, and like these algorithms are there to like engage you, and also, you know, you want to get the most likes, and we're all vulnerable to that. So a lot of it was learning to go, whoa, that's not a healthy relationship with it. You know, these are the values I have, this is what I want to use it for. But it took me a while to do that. It's not something that happens overnight, and I have to be really aware. Like sometimes I make content, I'm really happy with that content, I make it and I'll do really well. And it gets easy to be like way too happy by that. Oh gosh, look how many likes that's got. And you've got to go, no, that's not a healthy relationship. That is good content, and I'm happy and proud of it because it's good content, not because it's got lots of likes. Because on the opposing side, if you have not many likes on that, and you allow yourself to think, oh, I'm not happy, I'm not validated by that, then that has the opposite effect. So if you can't just believe the positive. If you believe the positive, you'll also believe the negative. And it's much healthier to go, I'll put stuff out there that I believe in, and I think that's really good content. Regardless, yeah, I'll take criticism and whatever. Someone says, actually, you're wrong in that, then that's fine, that's different. But don't get validated because of how many likes that you have. But it's a learning process, and I think we need to teach young people about that. You've
often said that you're quite introverted.
Yeah.
So how did an introverted A&E doctor end up on ITV2's leading reality TV show?
I feel I've told the story earlier. I had a speeded version. I had to have, the main reason I had Instagram actually, because you need to have Instagram to be like otherwise girls just think like you're a weirdo if you don't have Instagram, and you can't have a dating app without having an Instagram. So I was on Bumble because I was single. I was newly single at the time, and the producer found me through Bumble, DM'd me on Instagram, and I thought it was a prank. So I was like, one of my mates has sent this. Found out they hadn't, and I went into the hospital and I told one of my consultants who I thought would be like, oh gosh, that's terrible, God, Love Island, and she's like, oh, I'm a massive fan, you've got to go on that show. I go to the interview, and I was like, what? So she literally forced me to go to the interview, and it was one of those things where I just went in not worrying about it. I didn't particularly want to go on the show at the time anyway. And yeah, they were like, we'd love you to start, and I was like, oh gosh, now I've got to decide what to do. I was back and forth, should I do it? And in the end, I just went for it. It was one of those moments of, I was saying earlier on, I lost a very good friend of mine to leukemia, and she was, one of the things she said to me was like, you need to, push yourself a bit more in life. She knows I'm quite introverted and sensitive. Like, you need to go for things. And I thought, what would Freya say? And I thought she'd say, get on that show and see what happens. And yeah, I went for it, and it's very odd because obviously I'd imagine most of the room were extroverts, or most of the island were extroverts, and I was an introvert, which is a very odd situation to find yourself in, because as an introvert, like, I regain my energy and my tokens alone. So I like to be on my, I've really enjoyed today, but when I go home, I'll just be like, right, sit quietly, and that is me gaining my energy. Whereas extroverts often find this, like, their energy's here, and actually spending too much time alone saps their energy. So that was hard because you didn't get any time alone. So for like 8 weeks, I didn't get any space to do that. When I'm showering, it's probably the only time. Actually, the way that I sneaked introverted time was in the pool, because in the swimming pool you weren't allowed to talk because they couldn't use the mic in the pool because you can't hear anything. So I'd swim every night for like 40 laps, and that was my recharge, was in that pool. It was good exercise, but also no one can talk to me. I can just swim, and just be left alone. That was how I got through it, actually.
That's so interesting that you're still fitting in your sort of me time when you were on Love Island.
Had to, otherwise I would have, you can't, as I said earlier, you can't keep spending tokens.
Yeah. So, that is a powerful example of something that you are too scared to do, but you kind of force yourself to say yes to. So what things should we say no to because they're just things that we don't want to do, and what things should we force ourselves to say yes to?
Anybody?
Okay. For like kind of scripture on life now. I think we have to, for me, it comes back to knowing ourselves. So if I know who I am, how capable I am at any time, what my resilience is, how full my stress container is, how much of that is leaking over. So that awareness piece, then I've got a good understanding of what I'm capable of doing, and what stretching for me is healthy, and what actually stretching for me would start to become unwell as well, or start to become unhealthy. So I think it's not as simple as in this situation you should do that, but in that situation you should do this. I think it's more about self-awareness, knowledge, and then you can make healthy decisions for yourselves. I think secondly, having people around you. So connections are good for us, but you were talking there about your friend Freya. But I think just listening to people that we trust and who know us as well is always a good one. So I have key people in my life that are sounding blocks, and I'll take conversations or thoughts or ideas or concerns to them and discuss it in a safe place, the equivalent of swimming 40 lengths. Have that conversation with someone or in a space that you feel safe. And if you don't feel there is a person, then there's an enormous amount of fantastic organisations. You mentioned Samaritans earlier, there's Calm, there's so many different organisations that will give you a confidential free space to have those conversations. Talk it through to gain clarity, and then we can start to make decisions. And then the last point I would say is be kind to yourself, because we don't always know. You make the best decision in this moment, but we walk out that door and something else changes. We change, the environment changes around us as well. So don't be stuck and wedded to one idea, but don't also beat yourself thinking, well, I thought I made the right decision and now I haven't and other people seem to. Move and bend and flex. I would say mental health and well-being in its entirety is around flexibility rather than being stuck and stoic to one idea. How about you?
Yeah, there's quite a few things. I've been learning about boundaries over the last years, particularly a lot, and I think actually around this last 6 months, because when I had this role, I think a lot of people in mental health were like, right, we need your time on this. And there's one of me, and there's a lot of schools, even if it's just schools, there's a lot of charities, a lot of this. So all of these are worthy causes. There's no one within mental health that's not working in the space that isn't a worthy space to be putting energy. But I can't do all of that. It's impossible, not least because it's a volunteer role, so I can't do more than 3 or 4 days a week, otherwise I'll starve. I can't start eating my plants. So, you have to find a balance somewhere. And that meant I had to say no to people, which is really hard because they're coming to you and saying, I want you to support this school. Can you come and speak to our children? How can I say no to that school and yes to the other school? That's really hard. But then I quickly realised, because I was saying yes to too many, that actually I was doing everyone a disservice because I was being burnt out or not, or having to cancel or having to, whatever to try and get through that. So I realised I can't do everything. You have to. It's the same as the role. I was like, right, there's so many things to fix. Let's make a list of 100 things, and go. I can't fix all those things. I'll be here for 20 lifetimes. So let's pick the things that I can do. And I think that's the ability to say no to things that you maybe don't personally, like personal life stuff. I don't want to, I don't want to go to the pub tonight, and saying no to that. But it's also saying no to good opportunities and things that you actually think is a good opportunity. And it's like on the table, it might be five opportunities, opportunities for you, 5 good opportunities, but which ones are great opportunities and which ones do you turn down? And I think that's very hard in the modern day. Like how, I've got an opportunity to go and do this, and this, how do I decide? And then you have to go back to like, what is my long-term goal? What's my core values? What is it where do I want to be? And then say no to things. No, you can say no. And I think sometimes we feel bad to turn down things because it's a very British thing. I feel so bad, but the lecturers asked me to do this, and I've been saying I really wanted to get better in this area, but I've got 2 projects. Just say no sometimes. And no is a complete sentence. You don't always have to justify yourself. No, I don't want to do that. The other thing I would say actually about decision making. Never make a decision when you're really, really happy or something really good's happened, and to never make a decision when something really bad's happened, because those are 2 great examples. Like, there's never make a decision after a loss or something that's, if you failed at something, it's like, right, I'm going to quit now. It's a terrible idea because you've made it in a position of being like emotionally frustrated. You're not thinking from a level playing field, but also don't commit to things when you're really happy. Like you might have won. I don't know, you might have won a lottery lucky draw that day and had £1,000, and like you're chatting to your mate, you're like, oh yeah, I'll come to that next week, I'll come with you to Belgium, and then a couple of days later, like, I really don't want to go to Belgium. I don't know why I chose Belgium.
I was going to say, what happened? Yeah.
Belgium's probably lovely. But the point is just try and be aware of those things. There's nothing worse than making a commitment and then getting to the time. We've all been there being like, oh, why did I promise I was going to do that? I don't want to be here.
You talking about no, and then you were saying about education earlier, Nadia, as well. And I think so those are the sort of skills that I didn't learn at school. And I learnt them off other people and probably learnt them in quite unhealthy ways of how to do that. So we either say yes and we try and perpetuate this perception of ourselves that we're very helpful and useful and want to be everywhere, or we learned some quite difficult ways of saying no that were probably quite aggressive and quite unhelpful. So I think when we go back to your point earlier on around education, that's a key thing around social skills, around learning how to manage ourselves in different social sessions, whether it's online, as you were saying, or whether it's face-to-face. How can we learn these key skills that all of that is going to help us stay mentally healthy as well?
Yeah. I don't know if anyone's got any questions for Alex or Jan.
Hi. I have a question for Dr. Alex. Amongst the work that you're doing at the moment, are you creating any initiatives that directly address mental health in young marginalised communities?
Well, I think that's a big part of the reason that I've done the tour in the last month, to be honest, is that I think that we're not just marginalised communities, I think we can also be locationally very biased. Like, we're very London-centric for most things in this country, which I think is... there are people that live outside of London, clearly, and I think we need to have that approach. And we also, need to speak to other communities. And like you said earlier on, you can't tell people what they need. You need to understand what they need and hear from them to then have a health service that represents, and because people will access support in different ways, and communities and age groups and communities will differ. And if you look at, say, for example, take young people as an example, not all young people want to speak face to face to someone. They might want to use a text service. That's why Shout, I think, is fantastic. You text in the number, and you can speak to someone who's trained to talk to you on the other end of a phone, texting. You're providing a medium which that person feels comfortable to access support. It's not just like a one format for everyone, and I think that is the approach that we need to take. We need to have lots of options for everyone to access support in the way that they need it. But yes, that is a very important area.
I think there was a question there.
Yeah, so I have two questions. My first question would be, if you had to create a targeted lobbying campaign to help young people with mental health, what would it be? And my second question would be, I'm starting the mental health network at my work. Do you have any advice for running that? Thanks.
Let's go first. Well, I'd love people to help me lobby for the support hubs. I mean, that's my. You can see I'm one-minded on this, right? I picked my SMART goal. Like I want this, and yeah, that for me is my biggest priority at the moment. Is to get this over the line. I think it's something that's pretty unanimously agreed upon that it's probably quite a good thing across the kind of coalition of mental health. And that's really, where my focus point is going to be. And the second question was, I'll maybe let you answer the second. What was the?
Was that around what? Setting up your network, yeah.
But I guess you've done.
So I would say, so to your first question, what was your name, sorry? Noma. Hiya. Thank you for asking a question, first of all. I think to your first point around campaign, I think it's whatever makes you feel passionate. So go where the energy is. If you feel passionate about something, which clearly you do, and there's a particular angle on that you want to take, whether that's around your identity in some way, whether around that's because it inspired you because of somebody else and an experience they've had, whether it's about a particular need you see in a particular community, then that's what I would focus on in whatever way that is. So really go where your energy is. I think that will then grow and build, and people will feel your will and your authenticity about it, rather than trying to think what would look really good on social media or what's going to get me funding or whatever it might be. The second point around community and engagement, I think there's loads, but key ones. There's so many people out there doing fantastic work. So reach out, connect with people like Alex was saying earlier, and learn from others as well. So many people are being very successful in lots of creative ways. So I'd have conversations, I'd connect with others, be curious. And then the second point, I would say out of many of them, is trust in yourself as well. Because again, you've got to this point of thinking, I'm going to run a campaign and do some kind of campaign, some community networking because of something that's inspired you. So use that passion and trust that you will learn along the way. And if you don't know something, there's hundreds of people out there that are willing and generous to be able to share their knowledge with you. So those are the two things I would say.
Can I add something quickly as well? First of all, thank you, because I think it's important. We have the more people that are on this issue, the more we can actually achieve. Like, that's kind of, I was saying earlier on, I think if the whole country is like, we need to sort this out, we're much more likely to actually do something. Maybe that's oversimplified, but that's the way I see it. But I think the other point is as well is engage rather than disengage. I think it's very easy in an area like mental health, which is so emotive, like by nature of it, it's easy to get very angry. And sometimes that anger, if it's channeled in the wrong way, can actually cause more harm than good. And something if I've learned anything in this political space in the last couple of months, it's been, as frustrating as it can be sometimes, you have to try and engage with people, and sometimes you have to play at an even playing field, or you have to do things in a different way, and sometimes you get very frustrated, but you have to try and engage. I don't know if that makes sense, but doors sometimes close when people get too angry, if that makes sense. I don't know if that there's a balance between pushing and engaging someone and showing someone is really important, and actually just alienating. And I think sometimes very important people who have great messages aren't sometimes heard because the approach isn't quite right. Does that make sense? But yeah, good luck. Thank you.
Last thing I'll say to you is, as an organisation, we help people incubate ideas. So if you want to, please reach out to us, connect. We'd love to talk to you.
Thank you.
I think we've got time for one more question if anyone's got. Are there?
Thanks. Then your questions next. Where's the doggy treats?
Yeah, I've been a good boy. What would you say for young people who struggle with their mental health and addiction? Because a lot of the time, young people can't get support for their mental health if they're also struggling with addiction, but then they've got the addiction because they're struggling with their mental health, and so it just ends up becoming like an endless cycle. What would you suggest about that?
That's very interesting, because I wasn't aware. So sorry, you can't get support because
A lot of the time, if someone's got like a drug addiction or alcohol addiction, they can't get support from mental health services until they've tackled their addiction.
yeah, sure, okay, yeah, I see the, and it's very much like an interlinked issue, and sometimes some people talk about that being a symptom, isn't it, of like any other symptom of mental health struggles. And I think that is something that we need to look at, I guess, the approach of it. A very good point, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah, definitely. I would say, I mean, services have improved quite a lot, haven't you? So you've got dual diagnosis services now, which are much better at being able to hold a space with people with multiple needs as well. So I think when we go back to our earlier point about resourcing, we make sure that the services are set up and not working in silos. Whatever type of organisation, success rarely comes from that kind of silo working as well. I think, to Alex's point, that often our expressions, which are the first things that are getting us through the door of services, whether that's the criminal justice system, whether that's substance use, whether that's something else, may just be the presentation of what's going on underneath as well. So actually to take the time to really understand why, I think often we lead to, and possibly rightly so, in a crisis, we need to deal with someone's maybe substance use, but we forget the reasons why people are doing that as well. Rarely, I think, does anyone wake up and go, do you know what, I want to be really good at hurting myself in that way over a long period of time. I think it's more an expression of who we are. So services understanding that. And then the third bit, I would say, goes back to our point around education. So talking to particularly young people, but talking to communities, talking to individuals, and talking to particularly those that are experiencing higher needs for lots of different reasons, that actually the behaviours that we're engaging in, there are alternatives to that. There are ways that we can help numb pain or work through emotional distress or whatever it might be, that aren't necessarily using substances or alcohol or whatever else.
Well, it's kind of like you said, it's kind of, not looking at things in isolation. I think medicine's very traditionally looked at like, you've got a heart problem, you've got a problem with your brain, you've got a problem with your leg, whatever, let's deal with those things. But for example, cardiac disease, those who come in and have had heart attacks, now we focus a lot on the kind of psychological well-being post-MI, post-heart attack, because surprise, surprise, you have a heart attack, it affects probably the way you feel, your life can be affected. And I think it's having that dual approach and approaching things from like a standing back and looking at that 360 view rather than just looking at that directly at one aspect, I think is pretty important. I hope that's the way that we will move in general in health, actually.
Yeah, thank you so much for the questions, and unfortunately we've run out of time, which is a shame because we could talk about this forever, but thank you to the audience and thanks to Alex and John.
Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you very much.